Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Welcome to Congregation Beth-El Zedek for our Shabbat morning service this evening. To those of you who are here and those of you who are watching via live stream, we celebrate this Shabbat as Sydney Goldstein becomes Bat Mitzvah. We'll begin on page 101 of the prayer book Lev Shalem at your seats. We'll sing a song of welcome that we have joined together for a new day in prayer, Ma Tovu.
Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael. Ma Tovu, Ohalecha Yaakov, Mishkanotecha Yisrael.
We continue on page 103 as Sydney leads us in Birkot HaShachar, the blessings for our everyday miracles.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lasech vivina lechavin ben yom uven laila.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani betzalmo.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani batorin.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shasani Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, pokeach ivrim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, malbish arumim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, matir asurim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zokef kefufim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, rochach haaretz al hamayim.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, chamachein mitzadei gaver.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa li kol tzorki.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, ozer Yisrael bigvura.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, oter Yisrael betif ara.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hanotein layif koach.
Amen. We continue on page 122. Sydney leads us in Baruch She'amar, a celebration of God's creative powers.
Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam.
Baruch Hu.
Baruch oseh v'rishit.
Baruch Omer ve'oser.
Baruch gozer u'makayim.
Baruch merachem ha'aretz.
Baruch merachem ha'chabriyot.
Baruch meshalem sachar tov lireah.
Baruch chai la'ad v'kayam la'netzach.
Baruch modeh u'matzil. Baruch Shemo. We continue on page 136. We chant Ashrei responsively. A transliteration can be found on page 181.
Ashrei yoshvei veitecha, od yahalelu chasela.
Ashrei ha'am shekach lo, Ashrei ha'am she'Adonai Elohav.
Techila le David, aromimcha Elochai hamelech, va'arvacha simcha le'olam va'ed.
B'chol yamav archecha, ve'alala shimcha le'olam va'ed.
Gadol Adonai umhlal meod, ve'ligdulato ein cheker.
Dor ledor yishabach ma'asecha, gvurotecha yagidu.
Hadar kivod hodecha, v'divrei nifleotecha asicha.
Be'ezuz norotecha yomeru, u'dulatcha saprena.
Zecher avtucha yabiu, v'tzitkatecha yeranenu.
חנון ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל, ורחמיו על כל מעשיו.
יודוך אדוני כל מעשיך, וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותך יאמרו, וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני האדם גבורותיו, וכבוד אדר מלכותו.
מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
סומך אדוני לכל הנופלים, וזוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיני כל אליך יסברו, ואתה נותן לכם את שכלם בעתו.
פותח את ידיך, ומשביע לכל חי רצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרכיו, וחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קורב, לכל אשר יקראו באמת.
רצון יראיו יעשך, ואתה נותן, ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר אדוני כל אהבה, ואת כל הרשעים ישמיד.
תחילת אדוני ידבר פי, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך יה, מעתה ועד עולם, hallelujah. We continue on page 141 with the closing words of Psalm 150. Nishmat kol chai tevarech et shimcha Adonai Eloheinu. Soul of all that lives praises your name, Adonai our God. The spirit of all flesh exalts you, our sovereign, always. Who compares to you, great, mighty, awe-inspiring, transcendent God, to whom heaven and earth belong? We praise, acclaim, honor you, and bless your sacred name, fulfilling the psalmist's words. Barchi nafshi et Adonai v'chol krovai et shem kodesho. Let my soul bless Adonai, every fiber of my being praise God's holy name. We continue in the middle of page 147 with the beginning of our Shacharit service with Shochen Ad.
Shochen Ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv ranenu tzadikim b'Adonai la'yesharim anava tehila b'fi yesharim titah תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתרומם ובקרב קדושים תתקדש ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל ברינה יתפאר שמך מלכנו בכל דור ודור שכן חובת כל היצורים לפניך אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו להודות, להלל, לשבח, לבאר, לרומם, להדר, לברך, לעלי ולקליס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו ולמלך הגדול והקדוש בשמו ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך הוא שמו
אל מלך גדול בתשבחות אל ההודאות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלכי העולמים.
Please rise as we continue on page 148 with Chatzi Kaddish.
Yikadav Yidkadash Shemei Rava.
Amen.
Be'amad Yivarach Hirutei Ve'hamlich Machotei B'chayechon U'vyomechon U'vchayedecho Beit Yisrael Bagala U'vyisman Kariv Ve'imaru Amen Yehi Shmei Rava Mevora Le'alam Olam Me'amaya Yitbarach Ve'yishtavach B'itpa'ar V'yitromam V'yitnasei V'yitadar V'yitalal Shemei Dekudasha Berichu Le'elal Min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Damiran Be'yama Ve'imeru Amen.
Berechulet Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Yotzer or u'borei choshech Osei shalom u'borei et hakol.
Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of time and space, who forms light and creates darkness and brings harmony to all creation. Please be seated. We continue on page 151 with El Adon, a medieval poem of creation.
El Adon al kol ha'masim baruch u'mevorach v'fi kol neshama godlo v'tuvo malei olam da'at u'tvuna sovevim oto המתקיים לחיות הקודש ברדע בכבוד על המרכבה זכות ומשול לפני כניסו חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו טובים מאורות שבר אלוהינו יצרם בדעת בבינה ובשכל כוח וגבורה נתן בהם להיות מושלים בקרב תבל מלאים מסיב ומפיקים נוגה נעזיבם בכל העולם שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם עושים בהם הרצון קונם פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו סולה ורינה לזכר מלכותו קרא לשמש ויזרח אורה והתקין צורת הלבנה שבח נותנים לו קוצבה מרום תפארת וגדולה סרפים ועופרים וחיות הקודש.
We continue on page 154. Let us read together in the English. You have loved us deeply, Adonai our God, and showered us with boundless compassion. Avinu Malkeinu, for the sake of our ancestors who trusted in you and to whom you taught the laws of life, so may you be gracious to us and instruct us. Kind Creator, have compassion for us. Open our hearts so that we may understand and discern, hear and study, observe, perform, and fulfill all the teachings of your Torah with love. Enlighten our eyes with your Torah, attach our hearts to your mitzvot, unify our hearts to love and revere your name so that we never lose hope. We trust in your great, holy, awe-inspiring name. We will delight and rejoice in your deliverance. We continue in the Hebrew V'havienu.
V'harienu l'shalom me'arba kanfot haaretz v'tolichenu kol memiyut שמך הגדול סלע באמת להודות לך וליחדך באהבה ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך שמו
הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Please rise as we continue on page 155 with the Shema, our affirmation of faith.
Shema
Shema
Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavecha ubechol nafshecha ubechol meodecha vehayu hadvarim ha'elech asher anohi mitzavecha hayom halevavecha veshinantam levanecha vedibarta bam beshivtecha beveitecha uvelechtecha baderech uveshochbecha uvekomecha ukshartam leot al yadecha vehayu letotefot beinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha.
We continue silently on 156.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם אלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם באמת.
Please be seated. We continue on page 158 with our song of freedom that Moses, Miriam, and all Israel sang as they crossed the sea to freedom.
שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל פומה בעזרת ישראל ובדי חינונך יהודה וישראל גואל עלינו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש קדוש לישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We turn to page 159 and rise for our Shabbat morning Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei avotinu ve'imotinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel ve'Elohei Leah האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, קומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהם, למען שמו ואהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה, רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל החיים בחסד, מקיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ברוב עיקולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עבר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישוע, ונאמנת להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים.
161.
נקדיש את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמנו, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וכרזה אל זה ואמר, קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקודש גדול אדיר וחזק משביעים קול, מתנסים לעומת סרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקום מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב ימינו, לעולם ועד תשכון, תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך, לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים. בעינינו תראנה, תראנה מלכותך, כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך, על ידי דוד משיח צדקך, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, יקימו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול, בקדוש אתה, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור Adonai.
Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. We continue with the remainder of the Amidah silently, pages 162 to 166, with the traditional words of prayer and the words of our own hearts. May our words of prayer and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, Adonai, our rock and our Redeemer. You may be seated. We continue on page 167.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך בעולם ורקדותי וימליך מלכותי בך יקוני ומכון אבך יתוקו בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב וימרו אמן יהי שמירה במברה לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמך קדוש בריחו من כל ברכתה ושרתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בימה וימרו אמן תתקבל צלותנו ובאתון דחו ישראל קודם אבוני ושמעי וימרו אמן יהי שלום רב מאמין שמעי וחיים עלינו וילכו ישראל וימרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו וילכו ישראל וימרו אמן.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
The Passover Seder is my favorite Jewish ritual. And I love the Haggadah, which serves as a teacher's guide to a meaningful, festive, participatory meal that celebrates our ancestors' journey from slavery to freedom. At the heart of the Haggadah, we find a passage from Deuteronomy chapter 26, which we interpret and use as the vehicle to tell the story. The passage is also known as the First Fruits Declaration, or the Pilgrim's Prayer, because it was recited by the Israelite farmer as he brought the first fruits offering to the priests in Jerusalem on Shavuot. The rabbinic sages specifically tell us to read this passage and to explicate it in a manner that tells the story. The Pilgrim's Prayer famously begins, Arami Oved Avi. It reads, "My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt and lived there as a foreigner, few in number, and there he became a great nation, mighty and numerous. When the Egyptians treated us harshly and afflicted us, imposing hard labor on us, we cried to Adonai, the God of our ancestors. Adonai heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. Adonai brought us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, with terrifying display of power and with signs and wonders. Now, rabbis and scholars of the Haggadah and Midrash have tried to ascertain why this passage in particular was chosen to be the centerpiece of the Haggadah's telling of the Exodus from Egypt. There are all sorts of explanations, some sensible, some pretty outlandish. And the most likely reason is the simplest. In just a few short verses, we are presented with a concise retelling of the Israelite experience. Wait a second. Why am I talking about Pesach and the Seder and a passage from Deuteronomy today? It's December. We're right in the middle of the book of Genesis, reading the stories of Jacob's life. Hanukkah's in a few weeks. Now, the reason I bring this up is because the events in this week's Torah portion directly influence our ancient sages' understanding of this passage from the Haggadah. Commenting on the phrase, Arami Oved Avi, my father was a wandering Aramean, the Haggadah says, go and learn what Lavan the Aramean sought to do to our father Jacob. For Pharaoh condemned only the boys to death, but Lavan sought to uproot everyone. Now, on the surface, this interpretation makes no sense. Firstly, the rabbis want to interpret the phrase Arami Oved Avi as an Aramean sought to destroy my father. And this is actually grammatically incorrect because Oved is an intransitive verb that does not take an object. The word Oved means lost or wandering or on the brink of perishing. And the rabbis want to make it an active verb, sought to destroy. But the word doesn't appear there in that form. Furthermore, in context, the father that is mentioned would most likely be Jacob or Abraham. Secondly, Lavan the Aramean never actually harmed Jacob nor threatened his life. In next week's Torah reading, God warns Lavan not to do anything to Jacob as he's trying to escape his uncle. And later Lavan told Jacob that he would not harm him. He may have wanted to, but we don't hold people accountable for their thoughts or desires. This is a far cry from Pharaoh's death sentence on the Israelite baby boys, not to mention enslaving the Israelite population for like 400 years. Thirdly, the purpose of the Seder is to retell the story of the Exodus and the miracles that God brought. It reduces the story's impact if we say that Pharaoh was only half as bad as Lavan. But rabbinic tradition provides us with an interpretive principle called Ma'aseh Avot Siman Levanim. The happenings of the ancestors are a sign for the descendants. This means that the rabbinic sages interpreted stories in Genesis as foreshadowing later events. For example, Abraham and Sarah went to Egypt. They faced hardship and captivity. They were rescued when God struck Pharaoh's house with a plague and left with great riches from Pharaoh. Does this sound familiar to anyone? It certainly struck a chord with the rabbis. A similar pattern can be found in the life of Jacob. Our Torah portion today begins with Jacob going into exile because he feared that his brother Esau would try to kill him. He ended up spending the next 20 years in the home of his uncle Lavan. And during Jacob's time there, Lavan cheated him out of a deal to marry Rachel and was in effect a slave for at least 14 years. Over the course of the 20 years Jacob spent in his uncle's house, he gained 2 wives, 2 concubines, and had at least 13 children. The rabbis understood Jacob's life as also foreshadowing Israelite slavery in Egypt. Jacob is the one who travels to another land, becomes a servant for an unnecessarily long period of time, expands his family despite oppression, tries to escape, is pursued, and finally escapes after help from God. And when the rabbis interpret Arami Oved Avi as Lavan, they rely on the fact that when the Torah uses the word Arami, it is only in reference to Lavan. They also conclude that Lavan actually did try to kill Jacob. I'm going to contradict myself from a few moments ago, because God had to tell Lavan not to kill Jacob because Lavan actually wanted to do so. And he even says to Jacob, I have it in my power to hurt you and do bad to you, which certainly sounds like a threat to me. We must also reconsider what the rabbis say when comparing Pharaoh and Lavan, which is Pharaoh condemned only the boys, while Lavan sought to uproot everything. Of course, Lavan didn't seek to kill the members of Jacob's family. They were his own daughters and grandchildren. However, he did seek to prevent Jacob and his daughters and grandchildren from leaving his territory, even claiming them as his own. By this understanding, if God had not intervened, Lavan would have kept Jacob's family as prisoners. By denying them the chance to go free, he sought to uproot everything that meant something to Jacob and the foundations of the family of Israel. And although the rabbinic interpretation of "my father was a wandering Aramean" is not the simple, straightforward meaning of the text, it provides us with a deeper insight into the relationship between Jacob and Lavan. By linking the first fruits declaration with the exodus from Egypt and the story of Jacob and Lavan, the rabbis are telling us that our people's namesake, Jacob, Israel, foreshadowed the experience of slavery and freedom because he had undergone an experience of slavery and freedom himself. Mark Twain famously said, "History never repeats itself, but it does often rhyme." In this same vein, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs showed that the relationship between Lavan and Jacob became a paradigm for how anti-Semitism has infiltrated societies at various times in history, and demonstrates why Lavan may in fact be worse than Pharaoh. According to Rabbi Sachs, first Jews seek refuge from those who seek to kill them. A nation gives these Jews refuge and seem to be benefactors at first. At some point, however, that nation demands a price. This nation thought that based on the stereotypes that they held about Jews, Jews as a people would make them wealthy and would be a benefit to the nation. However, Jews would not assimilate or be co-opted because we had our own identity and way of life. Because Jews did not assimilate, the host nation turned against them. The nation would claim that the Jews were exploiting them when just the opposite was happening. When the Jews living in that nation succeed, the nation or a society or culture would accuse them of stealing what was rightfully theirs, conveniently forgetting how much Jews had contributed to their society. When Jews managed to maintain their own self-respect and independence and prosperity, envy turned to anger, and this nation became an inhospitable place for Jews. Just as this cycle played out in Jacob's life, it did so in different times and places throughout the Jewish experience. Not only is Jacob our namesake, he is also the paradigm for the Jewish people who do not give up, who do not let themselves be defined as someone else's property, maintaining our inner dignity and freedom. Immediately before the Haggadah tells us that Lavan was worse than Pharaoh, we encounter the line, "Not just once did someone rise up against us to destroy us, rather in every generation there are those who stand against us to destroy us." According to the Haggadah, Pharaoh is just following in Lavan's footsteps. There will always be anti-Semitism. The difference today is that it is not being enacted by a host nation. America is a multi-ethnic society whose laws treat us as individuals, not groups. The anti-Semitism that we encounter must be counteracted by exercising our power to create allies with other communities, speak directly to our elected leaders, protect ourselves, and fortify our own pride through Zionism and our connection to a flourishing Jewish state. When it comes to the challenge of anti-Semitism today, let us look to the namesake and of our ancestor, Jacob, Israel, who struggled with God and human beings and prevailed. Shabbat Shalom. We continue with Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service for the reading of the Torah, on page 168.
In kamocha v'Elohim Adonai v'yin kema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai hos le'amoyiti Adonai לחומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך ארם ונישא, אדום עולמי.
Please rise as the doors of the Ark are opened by Sydney's sister, Lenny Goldstein, and cousin, Kaylee Carpenter.
כי מציון תצא תורה, כי מציון תצא תורה, ודבר אדוני מירושלים, ברוך שנתן תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו.
This is the Torah, Israel's covenant of truth and righteousness, passed down through the long generations of our people, from Moses to the prophets, from rabbis to disciples, from teachers to students, from the people of Israel to the world. On this Shabbat, we continue this long chain of tradition as Sydney receives the Torah from her grandparents and parents as she becomes a bat mitzvah.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gedol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Everyone's going to use the ark for a moment. Gadol Adonai iti, u'neroma Shemo yadav. Okay. Here we see it's now. Perfect. To the front. Okay. Adonai הגדולה והגבורה והתפארת והנצח וההוד, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, כי כל בשמיים ובארץ, לך אדוני המלך והמתנשא לכל לראש. לכי לך to a place that I will show you. לכי לך to a place that you don't know. לכי לך on your journey, I will bless you, and you shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. You shall be a blessing. לכי
I put on the talit as a reminder that I now become a responsible member of the Jewish people. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehitatev b'tzitzit.
Sydney Harper Goldstein.
That's what you say when I'm in trouble.
You're usually in trouble when I say your full name, but not this time. It is hard for me to look at you now as a young woman when I see you in my heart as a little girl dressed in a dragon costume, sitting on the handlebar seat of my bike, roaring at people as we ride by and you yelling at me to pedal faster. You're now 13, and I cannot believe how quickly the time has gone. You are standing where I stood some 31 years ago as I became a bar mitzvah on this very bima. It is now your turn. You are beautiful, you are strong, and you are so much smarter than I was when I was your age. And I'm so very proud to be your father. As I was preparing this speech and thinking about you, I kept returning to a conversation our family shared on our Michigan road trip. I've been reading this book for work, Becoming a Leader of Character. The authors, a father and son duo who are West Point graduates. Okay, I know it sounds boring. It's going to get better. Just give me a second. I was telling you about the author's 6 defined leadership characteristics: courage, humility, integrity, duty, selflessness, and positivity. In the last chapter of the book, the authors challenged the readers to a family exercise. Define your family's values and assign each member a leadership characteristic that they most exemplify, and then have them act as an accountability partner for the other members of the family. So we did this. We defined our family's values, and we assigned leadership characteristics. Sydney, do you remember the leadership characteristic our family felt you most exemplified?
I forgot what it's called, but I know what it was. I forgot what it was called. It was like
It was duty.
Yeah.
Duty is what we chose for you.
Well, don't say it like that.
As defined by the authors, duty is taking action based on an assigned task or a moral obligation. An action based on a moral obligation is the more important of the 2 components of duty. The authors wrote, serving, leading, or fulfilling your moral obligation often requires the display of integrity and courage. These are 2 other leadership characteristics that you also possess, and they help drive your sense of duty. Integrity is shown in having a greater understanding that a dutiful act is more than just the mere completion of an assigned task. It's the understanding of the why an act is important and what makes it necessary to fulfill. Courage is needed to overcome and persevere challenges, difficulties, and everyday distractions that can take us all away from meeting our commitments and falling short on our goals. Throughout your life, kid, you have been the personification of duty, and it's something I admire about you. When you commit yourself to a task, an art project, a job, a chore, a friend, or anything, it is nearly impossible to get you to stop before you have it completed. Since you were 5, you've demonstrated duty in your commitment to Taekwondo, and you've now become a black belt. You've demonstrated duty in your academics by maintaining straight A's your entire life. You've demonstrated duty in the way you prepared yourself for the Carmel Middle School show choir auditions. You had felt in over your head and overmatched by your competition. Yet you committed yourself to practicing the singing and dancing routines until they were mastered. And you killed that audition. You were selected. You demonstrated duty in the way that you've committed yourself to your Hebrew studies and preparation for your bat mitzvah. I remember you telling me how you had set the goal for yourself of mastering all your Torah portions aliyot. Then just weeks ago, Mr. Lincoln had to call me into a bat mitzvah prep session, and we essentially had to have an intervention because you had simply run out of time, and you were a little upset about falling short of your goal. Mr. Lincoln had to remind you that hardly anyone does any more than one aliyah. I did none. Yet you have mastered all 4 of them. Thinking back on that moment, I realize how fitting it is that your Hebrew name that your mother and I chose for you is Aliyah. It means to rise up, and you have done that your entire life. I could not be more proud of your commitment, your duty, and your accomplishments. I cannot wait to see what you rise up to next. I love you.
Love you.
My dearest Sid, before you made me a mom, I had no idea the true depth of love my heart could hold. In an instant, I went from loving the idea of you as we awaited your arrival to actually holding you and being so completely overwhelmed with unconditional love like I had never known. I had no idea what I was doing as a new mom, and you were not the easiest baby, but all that all-consuming love got us through. It's funny to look back now and remember how shocked and scared I was when you were the loudest baby in the nursery at the hospital. Knowing you for the past 13 years, it's not surprising one bit now. You are my daughter, after all, but more so, it was just so telling of who you are when you came out screaming, "I'm here," for the world to hear. Then at 12 months, you spoke your first sentence. "What is that? What is that?" As you constantly pointed at the world around you and demanded answers. Shortly after, your favorite phrase was, "Sissy, do it." And you wanted to do everything yourself without our assistance. And your dad and I knew we had a smart, inquisitive, and truly special child on our hands. You were learning and changing so fast as a toddler, and with my demanding job at the time, I felt like I was missing it. Being your mom was my life's greatest joy, yet at the same time, I was more aware than ever of what I missed out on growing up without a mom of my own. It was my driving force to give you the opposite experience I had, and so it was heartbreaking to be away from you so much. That's when your dad and I made the decision to move to Indiana from California so I could be a stay-at-home mom and be closer to all of your family who are here with you today. It's hard to believe that was 10 years ago. In that time, we've watched you grow from our dragon-loving, imaginative, spitfire little girl into the articulate, passionate, and driven young woman you are today. I am in awe of all the qualities and talents that you possess that will no doubt carry you far as you venture closer and closer to adulthood. I've never doubted what an amazing human you will be when you are out in the world untethered from us. I mean, it's all you've ever wanted. Your 6-year-old self once asked in exasperation, "When can I be free to go live my life?" However, I am still your mom, so I'm going to give you some wisdom and advice that I hope you will take along with you today as you become a bat mitzvah. Continue to be your strong self and march to the beat of your own drum, but remember to be vulnerable and open to learning too. I thought I knew it all as a teenager, but I look back now and realize how naive I was. Even now in my 40s, I am learning and growing all the time, so try to remember that. Don't forget mistakes are okay, again, as long as you learn from them. Follow your passions and do what makes you happy. The older you get, the more you'll realize life's sadness. It's important to make space for what makes you happy, as it makes those hard moments a little easier to take. Put yourself out there, don't be afraid to fail. Failing is essential to succeeding, so embrace it and know it's just part of becoming better. Keep trying and don't give up, it will set you apart. Be humble and kind. You could be the most talented person in the room, and many times you will be. But if you're not kind, it really won't matter. As my friend and personal mentor, Maya Angelou, once said, people will never forget how you made them feel, and it's so true. Be the person that lifts others up, or as we always say, brings shalom. Lastly, I hope you take a moment today and every day to look around you and appreciate all that you have, including all this love and support for you in this room. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, and so many cousins. Family by blood and family by choice, you are beyond blessed. Remember that, and then keep that gratitude in your heart always. It really is the secret to living your very best life. On that note, I want to finish by saying just how very proud we are of you. You have worked so hard on this journey to becoming a bat mitzvah, and it shows in your presence here today. Not only have you excelled in your Hebrew and Judaic studies, you also took on a mitzvah project. You partnered with ArtMix, a nonprofit dedicated to helping enrich the lives of people with physical and mental disabilities through the arts. Through your efforts and the support of your family and friends, you were able to collect over $1,000 in art supplies for their organization. You also dedicated your time with the Michael's Supply Drive and with the Lolly Project, where you helped stuff art kits for the kids at Riley's Children's Hospital. You have had to juggle a lot with that, your advanced classes, Hebrew lessons, taekwondo, show choir, but you have managed to get straight A's, like your dad said, and complete your responsibilities to make it here today, and we could not be more proud to be your parents. I know your sister Lenny is very proud of you too. We love you so much, Sid, and will always be your very biggest fans. Mazel tov.
We continue with our Torah reading for this morning's service. We will be using the Eitz Chaim Torah commentary found at your seat. We'll begin on page 166 with the opening of Parshat Vayetze. And for the first Aliyah, we call upon Sydney's parents, Seth and Dahlia Goldstein.
ויעזור ויגן ויושיע לכל החוסים בו ונאמר אמן. כל אבוקות אלוהינו תנו כבוד לתורה. נא לעמוד ראשון ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. ואתם הדבקים באדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום.
Baruch et Adonai Hamborah.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamborach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bahar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayetze Yaakov miBeer Sheva, Vayelech Harana, Vayifka bamakom, Vayalen Sham, Kiva Hashemesh, Vayikach me'avanei hamakom, Vayasem me'ra'ashotav, Vayishkav bamakom hahu, Vayahalom, Vehine sulam mutzav arza, Verosho magia Hashemaima, Vehine malachei Elohim, Olim veyordim bo.
Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'Haye Olam Nata Betochenu Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. With the second Aliyah, we continue with verse 13 on page 166, and we recognize Larry Goldblatt and Cassie Goldstein, Sydney's grandparents. Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Va'ed. Amen.
Amen. Vehine Adonai nitzav alav. Vayomar ani Adonai Elohei Avraham Avraham Avicha Velochei Yitzhak Haaretz Asher Ata Shochev Alecha Lecha Etnana Uzarecha V'haya Zarecha Ka'afar Haaretz Ufaretzta Yama V'kenma V'tzafona V'nagva V'niverchu V'cha Kol Mishpachot Ha'adama Uvezarecha V'hinei Hanohi Imach Ushmarticha B'chol Asher Telech V'ashivoticha El Ha'adama Hazot Ki Lo E'ezovcha Ad Asher Im Asiti Et Asher Diparti Lach.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu
melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'olam natan v'tokenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. For the third Aliyah, we continue with verse 16 on page 167, and we welcome to the Bima Jocelyn Moore and Elise Carpenter, Sydney's aunts.
Baruch atah Adonai. Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayikatz Yaakov Mishnato Vayomer Achen Yesh Adonai Bamakom Hazeh Ve'anochi Lo Yadati Vayira Vayomar Manora Hamakom Hazeh Ein Zeh Ki Im Beit Elohim V'Zeh Sha'ar Hashamayim Vayashkem Yaakov Baboker Vayikach et ha'even asher sam mira'ashotav Vayasem otam hatzeva Vayitzok shemen al rosha Vayikra et shem hamakom hahu Beth-El ve'ulam Ulu shem ha'ir la rishona.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'hayei olam nata betoheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Na'amod Revi'i.
For the fourth Aliyah, we welcome up Jacob and Jackie Goldstein, Sydney's uncle and aunt, and we continue verse 20 on page 168.
Baruch et Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amin v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayidar Yaakov neder lemor im yeh Elohim imadi ushmarani baderech hazeh asher anochi cholech v'natan li lechem le'echol uveged lilbosh v'shavti b'shalom el beit avi v'haya Adonai li le'Elohim v'ha'even hazot אשר שמתי מצבה, יהיה בית אלוהים, אכל אשר תיתן לי, אעשרנו לה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amot Hamishi.
For the fifth Aliyah, we welcome up Sydney's cousins, Hannah Moore, Marissa Moore, and Madeline Goldstein. Sydney, you want to chant any more Torah? No, she's done. Okay. Yashir Koach, hearty
No,
Yashir
she's
Koach.
not done.
She's not done. Well, she's done with this part. More from Sydney later. But hearty Yashir Koach to Sydney for chanting those four previous Aliyot. We continue, page 169, chapter 29, verse 1.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamrach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayisa Yaakov ragla vayelech arsa v'neka kedem v'hayar v'hinei ve'er basadeh v'hinei sham shlosha edretzon rovetzim alehaki min haber hayi yashku ha'adarim והאבן הגדולה על פי הבאר, ונאספו שמה כל העדרים, וגללו את האבן מעל פי הבאר, והשקו את הצאן, והשיבו את האבן על פי הבאר למקומן.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Now la'amot shishi.
For the sixth Aliyah, we welcome to the Bima Sydney's cousins, A.J. Goldstein and Nathan Moore. We continue on page 169, verse 4.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Vayomer lahem Yaakov achai me'ayin atem, vayomeru mecharan anachnu, vayomer lahem hayedatem et Lavan ben Achor, vayomru yadanu, vayomer lahem hashalom lo, vayomru shalom, vehine Rachel bito, ba'im hatzon vayomer, hin ot hayom gadol, lo et ha'esif hamikne, Ki hashkuhu hatzon ulehu ra'uhu vayomru lo nukal ad asher yasfu kol ha'hadarim vaygelalu et ha'even me'al pi ha'be'er vehishkinu hatzon.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu et emet, v'shayeh olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. La'amot shvi'i.
For the seventh Aliyah, we welcome up family friends Eric Singer and Louis Singer. We continue on page 170, verse 9.
Et Adonai Hamavarah.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amin. Odenu medaber imam verachel baha im hatzon asher leaviha ki ro'ahi vayihi kasher ra'a Yaakov et Rachel bat Lavan achimo ve'etzon Lavan achimo vayigash Yaakov vayagel et ha'even me'al pi haber vayashket hatzon Lavan achimo vayishak Yaakov leRachel vayisa et kolo vayevk Vayagit Yaakov leRachel ki aki avihu v'chi ben Rivka hu v'tarot v'tiged le'aviha v'yehi Lishmo halavan et shama Yaakov ben achoto v'yarot likrato v'yekabek lo v'yenashek lo v'yeve'ehu et beito v'yesaper lelavan et kol hadvarim ha'ele v'yomer lo lavan ach atzmi uvesari ata v'yeshev imo chodesh yamim v'yomer lavan leYaakov aki ata va'avadetanu chinam hagida li Maskurtecha ulelavan shetivanot shteim hagdola leah v'shem hakatana Rachel v'nei leah rakod v'Rachel hayta yefa tohar yefahat mar'eh.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu et Torat emet v'chayei olam natan b'tadenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Those are awesome.
Please rise for Chatzi Kaddish.
No, you can go down. Yitkadal v'yitkadash miraba Be'alma tivrach yirutev yamlich malchutei B'chayekom uv'yomekom uv'chayetechu b'it Yisrael Ba'agalam v'zman kariv Ve'yimeru Amen Yehi shmiraba mevarach Le'olam u'lamei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach V'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnasi V'yitadar v'yitali v'yitalal Shemita kudasham Leila min kol birchata v'shirata
Toshvechata v'nechemata Tamira miyama
Ve'imeru
Amen. You may be seated. We continue with the Maftir Aliyah, which can be found on page 187, chapter 32, verse 1.
Tamod Aliyah bat Shit Pinchas Udalia bat Mitzvah Maftira Chazaka.
Baruch et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayash came Lavan בבוקר, וינשק לבניו, ולבנותיו ויברך אתם, וילך, וישוב לבן למקומו, ויעקב הלך לדרכו, ויפגעו בו מלאכי אלוהים, ויאמר יעקב, כאשר ראה מחנה אלוהים זה, ויקרא שם המקום ההוא מחניים. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נתן בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Please rise for the lifting and dressing of our Torah scroll. We'll recall to the bima Jacob and Jackie Goldstein to lift and dress the Torah.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל,
Torah, 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 Please be seated. We continue with our Haftarah, which begins on page 189. We'll be reading from the book of Hosea, chapter 12, the few verses on 189, and then we skip to the bottom of 191, chapter 14, verse 2, a passage which is also read on Shabbat Shuvah, the Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nvi'im tovim v'ratza b'divreihem hane'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher Batorah uv'Moshe avdo uv'Yisrael amo uv'nvi'ei ha'emet v'tzedek. Amen. Vayivrach Yaakov sedei aram vayavod Yisrael be'isha uve'isha shamar uve'navi ha'ela Adonai et Yisrael mimitzrayim uve'navi nishmar. Hichis Ephraim tamurim v'damav alav yitosh v'cherpato yashiv lo Adonav. Shuva Yisrael ad Adonai Elohecha ki hashalta ba'avonecha kehu imachem adavarim v'shuvu el Adonai imbru elav kol tisa avon v'chachtov unshama farim sefatenu Ashur lo yoshienu al sus lo nirkav velo no more od Eloheinu lema'aseh yadenu asher becha yerucham yatom erpa meshuvatam ohavem nedava ki shavapi mimenu Echayech ata leYisrael yefrach kashoshana vayach shirashav kavanom Yahu yankotav Vihi hazai todo, vereach lo kavanon. Yashuvu yoshvev etzilo, yahayu dagam, veyifrachu hagafen, zichro keyena levanom. Ephraim maliod, la'atzabim, ani tiva ashurenu. Ani kivrosh ra'anam mimeni peryacha nimsach mi chacham vayaveinele navom veyedaem ki yesharim darchei Adonai v'tzadikim yechuvam ufoshim yikashluvam. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sor kol haolamim sadik bechol hadorot ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer ve'oseh ha'medaber u'mekayem shekol devarav emet v'tzedek ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu v'ne'emanim devarecha v'davar echad midvarecha ahor lo yashuv rekam Ki al melech ne'eman, v'rachaman ata, baruch ata Adonai. Ha'el ha'ne'eman, b'chol devarav, rachem, al Zion hi beit hayenu, v'la'aluvat nefesh toshia, bimheira v'yameinu, baruch ata Adonai. Mesameach Zion bevanecha. Samchenu Adonai Eloheinu be'Eliyahu hanavi avdecha uv'malchut Beit David meshichecha b'mheira yavo ve'yagel libenu al ki solo yesosar ve'lo yinhalu al dacherim et kivodo ki v'shem kod shahanish batalo shelo yichben hero leolam va'ed baruch ata Adonai Magen David al haTorah ve'al havodah ve'al haneviim ve'al yom haShabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu likdusha ve'limnucha lechavod u'latif aretz al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu mo dimalach u'maverachim otach yitbarach shimacha befi kohai tamid leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov, simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov, simen tov, mazel tov, mazel tov, simen tov.
Hurry. Please rise as we prepare to return the Sefer Torah to the Ark. I'd like to call to the Bima to open the doors of the Ark. Sydney's uncle and aunt, Nicholas Arhart and Becca Miller. Sydney will now share some words about her Torah portion and the meaning of this day in her life.
The Torah portion for my bat mitzvah is called Vayetze, which tells the story of the life of Jacob. During the story, Jacob travels to Haran. Jacob comes upon a place to spend the night and uses a rock to rest his head while he sleeps. That night, Jacob has a dream of a ladder with angels traveling up and down upon it, and God standing at the top. In the dream, God promises Jacob many children, and he promises the land to Jacob and his descendants. When Jacob awakes, he turns the rock he slept upon into a monument and named the place Beth-El, which means the house of God. Jacob continued on his travels and meets his cousin Rachel by a well. Rachel gets her father, Laban, and tells him that Jacob has arrived. Jacob, having fallen in love with Rachel, asks Laban for her hand in marriage. Jacob offers Laban a deal that he would work for Laban for 7 years in order to marry Rachel, Laban's youngest daughter. Laban agrees, but after 7 years, he deceives Jacob by giving him his eldest daughter, Leah. Laban then makes Jacob work for another 7 years in order to marry Rachel. Through Leah, Rachel, and their servants, Jacob has 12 sons and 1 daughter. Those sons eventually become the leaders of the 12 tribes of Israel. Although Jacob had now worked for Laban for 14 years, Jacob had very little wealth to show for these years of service. Laban makes another deal with Jacob for a portion of his sheep flock. Jacob is promised all of the dark, speckled, and spotted sheep. However, Laban deceives him by giving those sheep to his own sons, leaving only light and solid-colored sheep in the flock. In the end, Jacob outwits Laban by breeding the remaining sheep so that all of their offspring are speckled, spotted, and dark. The main themes of Vayetze have to do with integrity and family dynamics. We see the theme of integrity through Jacob and Laban's relationship and how they deceive each other throughout the Torah portion. The main theme of family dynamics appears in Leah and Rachel's rivalry and their complex family. What stood out to me the most is how Jacob married 2 sisters, who were also his cousins, and he had kids with them, including their servants. I was also struck by how the women were treated as objects rather than equals. I found this part of the story uncomfortable to read about. I understand that during biblical times, women were considered to be more vulnerable and in need of protection by men. Marriage was much more of a financial transaction where wealth was exchanged so that the woman would be provided for by her husband and the father would not be selling off the daughter for nothing. Although our ancestors and their way of life are much different from me, it still bothers me that women were treated as objects. Jacob had to work for Rachel, and then Laban gave Leah to Jacob as a trick. Although Rachel loved Jacob, neither she nor Leah were asked if they wanted to be married. They were objectified, traded to Jacob in exchange for labor without any say of their own. In biblical times, women were treated as vulnerable objects who were less than men. It is truly incredible to look back on those times and in comparison to how it is today. We have come a long way since then, and we have many people and events to thank for it. In the 1800s, feminism formally began at a rally of 300 men and women to protest the lack of women's rights. Elizabeth Cady Stanton established the new movement's political strategies and ideology. In the 1900s, we saw the rise of different waves of feminism that demanded the right to vote, women in the workforce and military, and the redefinition of the roles of men and women in daily life. Today, more women than men attend college and graduate from college, and women can achieve anything they want to. Women can also decide whether or not to marry and whether or not to be mothers. As a whole, this portion really makes me see how fortunate I am to live in America at this time. While some of these issues still exist, we live in a mostly free society where people can choose who they marry, decide how they want to live, and pursue a life of happiness and meaning. As I become a bat mitzvah, there are many people who have helped me to reach this day. Thank you to Rabbi Dennis for your 47 years of leadership at Beth-El Zedek. We will miss you when you retire. Thank you to Rabbi Hal for helping me prepare for my bat mitzvah and in writing my speech. Thank you to Ken or Melissa for teaching me and providing me with the recordings I use to practice the prayers of service. Thank you, Mr. Lincoln, for pushing me and helping me learn my Torah and Haftorah readings. Thank you to George Kelly and my Sunday school teachers. Thank you for putting up with me for 10 years and teaching me Hebrew and about Judaism. Thank you to my grandparents on my father's side, Bubby, Papa Larry, and Grandpa Sid, who I was named after. Thank you to Bubby for doing such a great job carrying on the Jewish customs and traditions I've grown up with, and that I look forward to continuing with my own family one day. Thank you to Papa Larry for taking such good care of Bubby and our family. Thank you for always having mints for me when I visit. Thank you, Grandpa Sid, for meaning the world to my dad and the rest of our family. Although I only met you a few times when I was little, I feel like I know you from stories told, and have heard more than once that you're where I get my sassy personality and sense of humor. I wish you were here to see it, and this day. Thank you to my grandparents on my mother's side, Grandpa Rick, Nana, and Granddaddy Roy. Thank you, Grandpa Rick, for loving and spoiling Lenny and I. You always have a small gift or sweet treat every time we see you. Thank you, Nana. You always believe in me. You always make me laugh, and nobody cries because they love me as much as you. Thank you, Granddaddy Roy. I love it when you come visit our family and stay at our house. You always make me feel happy and warm. You are Nana's rock, and I love you. Thank you to my sister Lenny. I know we have our sibling disagreements, but the truth is that you're my bestie, and I love you. No one is there more to talk with, to laugh with, and to torture. We will always have each other, and I'm thankful for that. Dad, I love it when you act silly. You have a way of making everything fun. My favorite thing is when we go on adventures together, like our tradition of catching the sunrise when we go on vacation, or that time we went sledding down the really steep hill on the golf course. No matter how old I am, I'm always up for adventures with you. Mom, I love it when we spend time together alone. You are always there to listen. You share important life lessons and advice with me. I hope we always stay this close. Mom and Dad, thank you for raising me and helping me become the person I am today. You've done so much for me. You are the main reason I'm standing here. I'm so lucky that you are my parents, and I love you. Thank you all for coming this morning and celebrating with me as I become a bat mitzvah at Congregation Beth-El Zedek. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Ken and Melissa, we got to get her signed up for for Yachad and Torah readers and all that stuff.
They keep us in business,
Yeah,
this family.
that's right.
Good.
Get her signed up. Sydney, it's been an adventure being on the Bema with you the last couple of days. Last night, at the beginning of the service, Sydney whispered to me, "What happens if I sneeze?" And I said, "Well, say Gesundheit and sneeze into your elbow, not your hand." And this morning, I had to tell her a couple times, just be in the moment. Don't think about what's coming, just be in the moment. And you were. And then, of course, Sydney was like, my Haftarah, yes, I'm so excited for it. Very excited to chant that. And it's been a pleasure being up here this weekend with you, and being a pleasure getting to know you and your family as you prepared for this day. You are creative and intelligent, excelling in academics and in art. You achieve high levels in both math and writing, and your creativity knows no bounds as you produce art through the mediums of drawing and felt and sculpture and sewing and painting and dance and song, just to name a few. I was really, really impressed when your mom showed me some of the examples of your drawing on her phone, right, in our meeting a couple of weeks ago. And you've even found a way to combine your love of art with giving back to the community, working with Art Mix for your Mitzvah project. You have a strong moral compass, knowing right from wrong, and you're not afraid to speak out when someone is doing something wrong or something is unfair. You are fiercely loyal to your friends and family, a leader among your peers. You're curious about the world. You ask good questions. You make astute observations. Your parents described you as strong-willed, and that shows itself in both positive and negative manifestations. You are a free thinker and a free spirit. You like to make your own rules as they are guided by your sense of morality. And sometimes you'll risk breaking others' rules just to get a good laugh. It's clear that you possess that great Jewish trait that we call chutzpah. And chutzpah, I looked it up, it's defined as gall or impudence, but those have negative meanings. In reality, chutzpah is closer to audacity or boldness in their more positive senses. And Jewish tradition values chutzpah, and many stories from the Torah and rabbinic tradition highlight people who demonstrate chutzpah before God and other human beings. Most famously, Abraham and Moses show chutzpah when they argue with God in pursuit of justice. And while you spoke about some of your frustrations about how women were treated in the Torah, the flip side is that many women exhibited chutzpah as well. The matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, all demonstrated this characteristic at some point in their lives. And probably the most famous example of women's chutzpah is from a story in the book of Numbers where 5 sisters, Machla, Noah, Hogla, Milcah, and Tirzah, go to Moses and God and demand that they receive the land of their deceased father, pointing to a loophole in the law. You also have strong Jewish models in your own family, the Goldstein clan. There are many fond memories you have of holiday celebrations, especially Hanukkah with White Elephant and Cousin Night. And I know that you derive great joy from being part of the cousin squad, even if you're one of the youngest of the bunch. You continue in the long tradition of Goldstein participation at Beth-El Zedek. Today's celebration follows in the path of your cousins who became B'nai Mitzvah in recent years, and your father and uncle who became B'nai Mitzvah 3 decades ago. Your grandmother Cassie sang in our choir for many years. She taught music in the religious school and was active in our sisterhood. Your grandfather, Sid of blessed memory, was beloved by the Jewish community and led our corps of ushers the High Holy Days. And this role stayed in the family as your father Seth and Uncle Jacob took over from him. And the Beth-El Zedek community can reliably count on being greeted by a Goldstein on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Your grandmother Cassie and your mother Dahlia are models of strong Jewish women who demonstrate commitment to our faith and people. You too will take upon the role of a strong Jewish woman as you become bat mitzvah, the next stage of your life. And as you noted in our conversation, being Jewish and becoming bat mitzvah is a unique experience, different from many of your friends, and it's also one that connects you to your family and your heritage. We look forward to you establishing yourself as part of the next generation of the Goldsteins, while also paving your own distinctive way. Mazel tov on reaching this day. So if I could ask you and your mom and dad to rise right now for a blessing. Mish berach avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, imotenu Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et Aliyah bat Shet Pinchas v'Dalia, asher alta hayom likrat haTorah, v'haftara le'ot habat ratzon lichot chayim ruhim levat Yisrael. May God, who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless you, Sidney Goldstein, who has been called to the reading of the Torah and the Haftarah in token of your desire to lead a worthy Jewish life. May God, who was with you from birth and enabled you to grow to your present stature in body and spirit, continue to be with you in the life that is ahead. May it be God's will that you continue to grow in health and strength, in wisdom and humility, in love and loyalty, in faith and courage, and that you may ever be a joy to your parents, an honor to your people, a credit to your country, and a true servant of God. And to this we say, Amen. And let us join together in our blessing for new occasions, our Shechianu. Don't sit down yet. Don't sit down yet. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. We'll join together in Shechianu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Shechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, source of all creation, for giving us life, for sustaining us, and for bringing us to this happy occasion. Amen. You may kiss the bat mitzvah. Now you can have a seat. Sydney, join me up here back on the bima. As you begin your adult Jewish journey, we have a backpack full of things to take on your way. We have a certificate of bat mitzvah. This happened. We have a Torah commentary, a siddur, and some other wonderful things for you to begin your Jewish journey. So we'll give you that, and we will head back to our seats and continue. No. With me. You're up here with me.
Oh.
You're up here with me.
Oh, okay.
We continue on page 204 in our Lev Shalem Siddur as we sing Ein Kelohenu.
Ein Kelohenu,
rise and turn to page 205 for Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגוהר עלינו ככל המונם, ואנחנו עולים ומשתחווים לפני מלך מלכים המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שירותי שמיים ועושה את עצמו ושכינת הזמן מתחת אין עוד הכנה כנמכה ונמכינו סכם ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו
Mourners and those observing yard sites, please remain standing. In reciting Kaddish, we affirm our awareness of holiness in our lives and recognize that much of our experience of God's goodness, grace, and love comes to us through those whose lives have touched our own. On this Shabbat, we remember loved ones who have died in recent days and weeks. Al Sachs, Barbara Cohen. We keep them in our hearts alongside those for whom we mourn and those whose yard sites occurred in the last week, in loving testimony to the faith that links the generations. Those who mourn and all who remember, join the recitation of the Kaddish, page 207. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'alma divrach yiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, v'chayachon v'yom echon, uv'chayet echol beit Yisrael, l'agalah v'izman kari v'imru, amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam l'almei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shemei dekudusha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran miyama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav huya aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael Amen. May the source of peace and comfort send comfort to those who are bereaved, peace to Israel and to the entire world, and to this we say, Amen. You may be seated. Shabbat Shalom. For some announcements and Shabbat greetings, I'd like to welcome to the front podium Cindy Harp, representing our officers and board of directors.
Thank you, Rabbi. On behalf of the Board of Directors of Beth-El Zedek, I'd like to welcome you to Shabbat services and, of course, Sidney Goldstein's Bat Mitzvah. Sidney, you did a fabulous job, like everybody knew you would. Mazel Tov to you, to your parents, Seth and Dahlia Goldstein, to Larry Goldblatt and Cassie Goldstein, Rick Williams, Janice Agan, and Roy Graham, and your great-grandfather, George Williams. As usual, the Goldsteins kind of fill the room. It's fabulous. Couple quick announcements. Rabbi Dennis Sasso will be hosting a conversation regarding reproductive freedom, a Jewish value, on Monday at Cocktail Judaism in person for the first time in quite a while, this Monday, December 5th at 7:30. Also, please join us for Hanukkah Shabbat and dinner Kabbalah of Laughs Shabbat on Friday, December 9th, so that's this Friday at 6, with special entertainment by the Bible Players. An adults-only unkosher comedy show will be held Saturday, December 10th at 7:30. Please check the Shabbat announcement leaflet for more information on both of these events. And this is bold, I think, for me, because I always forget this part. Please join us in the Simon Celebration Hall for an oneg following services. Shabbat Shalom.
Always an adventure. Sydney's like, I'm so excited for my party now. You should be. You should be excited. This is a great morning. We conclude our service on page 211 as we sing Adon Olam.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra V'yitnasav B'chefzo Kol Azay Melech Shelo Nigra Yachari Kichlot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora V'hu Haya V'hu Hovel V'hu Yiyah V'tivara B'yado Av Kidruchi V'tishan V'yahira V'yimruchi Keviati Adonai Veloida.
Shabbat Shalom.